So at this time of the year, the custom is to study about the Beis Hamikdash, what the Beis Hamikdash is about, how the Beis Hamikdash was built, what happened in the Beis Hamikdash, etc. What's interesting is that the minute you get into the discussion around the Beis Hamikdash, there's obviously a core question that you have to address, and that is, what's the purpose of a Beis Hamikdash? Why do we have it in the first place? And as is often the case in Judaism, where you have different opinions on a subject, so people imagine if you have different opinions, it must mean that there's a conflict. Because this person says X and that person says Y, so clearly they disagree with each other. The truth is that in Judaism, we have an expression, we have a principle that says, Eilu va'eilu divrei Elokim chaim. That even when you have diverse opinions on a particular subject, it's not necessarily that the one has to be to the exclusion of the other. It's possible that they are both accurate, one talking from a particular angle and the other talking from a different angle. And so it is with the Beis Hamikdash as well. When it comes to the question of what is the purpose of the Beis Hamikdash, you will see that there are different opinions, and by the way, based on those different opinions, it has a practical application. How do you design the Beis Hamikdash? What is the focus of the Beis? Very, very interesting. So the classic division is between scholars like the Rambam and scholars like the Ramban. That's a classic division about what the purpose is of the Beis Hamikdash, where the former says that the primary purpose of the Beis Hamikdash is that we need to have a place, Makom sheboi makriven karbonos, a place where you can bring offerings to Hashem. So in other words, the core aspect of the Beis Hamikdash is the fact that there would be an altar, and the altar would be used to bring these offerings to Hashem. By the way, people make a terrible mistake, and everybody thinks that the whole purpose of bringing sacrifices was mainly as a form of atonement. And that's absolutely inaccurate, because if you have a look at the various kinds of offerings, you see that sin offerings are only one of the various categories of korbanos. In fact, on the contrary, the word korban comes from the word karoiv, to come close. So the primary reason why we bring offerings is to have a system that allows us to come close to Hashem. So if you're going to tell me that the purpose of the Beis Hamikdash is to have Makom sheboi makriven karbonos, a place where you can bring sacrifices, where you can bring offerings, so essentially what we're saying then is that it's to be a place where you can have this opportunity to come close to Hashem, to be able to draw close to Hashem. That's one version, one perspective of what the Beis Hamikdash is. The other perspective is that it is a place for Hashras Shchinosoi. It's a place for Hashem to allow His divine presence to be visible, to be accessible. It's almost as if to say the one perspective on the Beis Hamikdash is what it does for us, how it creates a portal of connection for us to be able to draw close to Hashem. And the other looks at it from Hashem's perspective and says that the purpose of the Beis Hamikdash is for Him, to allow Him a way to reach down to us. And that's why you could say Elu va'elu divrei Elokim chaim, that both of them are valid, because it's not one to the exclusion of the other. There's a symbiotic relationship that is created in the Beis Hamikdash that on the one hand draws us in an upward motion, allows us to rise above the ordinary and to be able to connect to Hashem. And on the other hand, draws Hashem in a downward motion, so to speak, to come into our world and to be able to relate to and connect to us. So both of these are valid. So with that in mind, you go back and you read up about the Beis Hamikdash and you see some interesting facts. For example, the Rambam, who takes the view that the ultimate purpose of the Beis Hamikdash is a place where we can bring karbonos, so he says that the location of and the structure and the layout of the Beis Hamikdash will all be built around sacrifice. So in other words, the core factor in the Beis Hamikdash is the place where you bring sacrifices, and therefore he gives us a very interesting history. If you go and you look in the Hilchos Beis HaBechira, in the laws of the Beis Hamikdash that the Rambam writes, so he tells us, I think it's in the 3rd chapter, he tells us that the location of the Mizbeach, of the altar, is incredibly specific. Because must be, if the whole purpose of the Beis Hamikdash is around the process of bringing sacrifices, then the most important component has to be the place where you bring those sacrifices, which is the altar, and therefore it makes sense that the part of the Beis Hamikdash that has to be the most carefully located and calibrated must be the place where you bring those offerings. So that's what he says, that the place where the Mizbeach was located was very precisely chosen. And then he gives us an interesting history to it. Very interesting. It says that place where the Beis Hamikdash, or more specifically where the Mizbeach was going to be, where the altar was going to be, he says that place was used previously as an altar in a number of different occasions in history. Firstly, probably the one that we speak about most frequently is the story of the Akedah, where Hashem tells Avraham Avinu that he's got to take his son Yitzchak and he's got to take him up onto a mountain, which Avraham later calls Bahar Hashem Yera'eh, the mountain at which Hashem will be revealed. So that's already prophetic. That's alluding to the fact that at some point in the future, this would be a mountain where Hashem would be revealed, referring to the Temple Mount. So that's probably the one that we know the most, is that there was a place that Abraham took his son and he tied him onto an altar and he was about to shecht him, and at the last minute Hashem said, okay, listen, you've passed the test, and everybody goes home okay. Prior to that, the Rambam says, that is the same location where after the flood, Noach, so we know that the flood ended on Mount Ararat, which they say is in Turkey. But it appears that Noach then made his way back to Israel, and when he got back to Israel, he went to the site of what in the future would be the Beis Hamikdash, the site that in the future would be the Temple Mount, and there he built an altar, and that altar he used to bring a sacrifice to Hashem to show gratitude for the fact that they had been saved during the time of the flood. So the first one we read about, not in chronological order, it's actually reverse chronological order, but the one that comes to mind first, which is Avraham Avinu taking his son Yitzchak up onto the Mizbeach. So then the altar becomes a symbol of dedication to Hashem. That's what it is. So if you tell me that the purpose of the Beis Hamikdash is to bring offerings and to bring sacrifices, you contextualize that and you understand that what that means is the purpose of the Beis Hamikdash is a place where I come and I show dedication to Hashem. And not just any ordinary dedication, but extreme dedication, like Avraham and Yitzchak, who were ready to, Avraham was ready to slaughter his son, Yitzchak was ready to die for Hashem's sake. When you look at the story of Noach, then you appreciate that the Beis Hamikdash is also a place where you come to show gratitude, not only to dedicate yourself, which is incredibly important, and is, if you think about it, the foundation of the whole of Judaism, but it's also a place where you come to thank Hashem for your blessings. And if you look at the history of what used to happen in the Beis Hamikdash, there were various occasions where you would come and you would give gratitude, whether it was the Todah thanksgiving offering that a person had to bring after they had endured certain circumstances, which in today's world we equate with benching goimel. You say a special bracha to thank Hashem for having traveled safely through a difficult or a dangerous environment, or having come out of prison, or the one that is unfortunately common today is a person who recovers from a dread disease. Also, we know that when a person used to bring bikurim, the first fruits, so once a year you had to bring your bikurim to the Beis Hamikdash. You were a farmer, you brought your first fruits. There was a whole declaration that you had to make, and the purpose of that declaration was to show gratitude to Hashem for all of the blessings in your life, not only the blessings of this particular crop. So you can see that there's that theme in the Beis Hamikdash as well, a place to come and show gratitude to Hashem. And then, again, using reverse chronology, so going further back in history, when Adam recognized Hashem as God, because the Torah tells us that obviously no other creature was capable of acknowledging Hashem as God, and then when Adam came along, he said, Boyu nishtachave v'nichra nivrecha lifnei Hashem Elokeinu, come, and he spoke to the rest of creation, and he said, let us go, let us bow, let us prostrate ourselves and bless Hashem. So he was the one who created consciousness of the fact that there is a creator. So that tells you then that the purpose of the Mizbeach, that's why he brought an offering. He brought the offering to acknowledge God. So you have the Mizbeach as a place of dedication to Hashem, that I'm willing to dedicate myself to the nth. You have the Mizbeach as a place of gratitude, where you express thanks to Hashem for what you have. You have the Mizbeach as a symbol of acknowledging that Hashem exists. It's like a declaration of faith. The fact that you have a Beis Hamikdash, the fact that you have a Mizbeach is a declaration of faith. We believe that there is a Hashem and that the whole world is there to serve Him. In other words, it's a recalibration of how we're supposed to see the world. Unlike the way that we're taught to see the world, is that everything out there is an opportunity for me and I have to seize the opportunity. So there might be business opportunities, there might be social opportunities, there might be leisure opportunities. The bottom line is that the Mizbeach is there to switch our orientation and to say, The whole purpose of everything that exists is to be directed towards Hashem. And that would translate itself into the way that they brought offerings, because to bring an offering had to comprise the full range of existence. There was the human, who would bring an animal that was accompanied by something produced from the plant kingdom. So there would be wine and there would be flour. And you always had to include salt to represent the mineral world. So the idea is you bring the whole of existence and you direct it towards Hashem. Again, the word korban from the word karov, to come close to Hashem. So the purpose, you bring it all together in order to come close to Hashem. And then the Rambam says, the truth is that the place that Adam identified to bring his sacrifice, which is the place that would later become the location not only of the Beis Hamikdash, but specifically of the altar, he says that is the spot on earth from which Adam was created. We know that Adam was created out of the earth, right? That he was made from dust, as the famous expression people like to use, dust to dust. So, afar ata vel afar tashuv, you are dust and you will return to dust. Which dust? Where did it come from? So the Rambam says that's the spot, exactly that spot where the Mizbeach would be built over the course of all of these generations. That is the place that Adam was created from. And he uses this expression, he says, Adam mimekoim kaparosoi nivra. The man was created from the place of his atonement. So that gives us the final perspective on what the purpose of a korban is, that it's not the first perspective. The first perspective, why do you bring a korban? To dedicate yourself to Hashem, and to acknowledge Hashem, and to show gratitude to Hashem. There is also a component associated with bringing a korban, which is, if God forbid a person has detached themselves, if they've lost their way, if they've somehow distanced themselves from Hashem. So this is the place that allows you the opportunity to reconnect. It's the place that allows you the opportunity for repair. It's the place that allows you to come close even when you have been far. So those are some of the components from the Rambam's perspective on what the purpose of the Beis Hamikdash is, which is in summary a means by which we as people are given an opportunity to come close to Hashem.